So today we're going to talk a little bit about social media. Who feels that social media is a little bit challenging when it comes to recruiting? Just pop it into the chat. Obviously, social media has its challenges, certain challenges, especially if you're trying to accomplish something and you have so many different things on the go. You're juggling a lot of different tasks. And that can be one way that avoid Facebook. Yeah, that's one thing. We'll talk about that a little bit. There are a lot of different platforms. You're right, Wasim, not every candidate is social media savvy. Absolutely. So there are different challenges that you face as you're setting up your strategy, as you're really getting to know your candidates. And now that COVID hit, everybody is online and everything is digital. So some people that weren't social media savvy are really having to put themselves in a different position. So you as a recruiter almost have to hold people's hands sometimes because you have to make sure that they're presenting themselves well on social media, because that is what employers look at as well. And you have to make sure that you're connecting with them on a deeper level. Yeah, it's a mandate now. Yeah, for absolutely. It's one of those things where you really just need to be on social. So today we're going to talk about how you can attract candidates through social media, a few tips and tricks that you can do. Again, I really want you to walk away with some actionable tips that you can use. But in reality, if you have questions, again, drop them anytime you want in the chat, and we might have some time at the end of it, or you can also chat with me at a separate time as well. I say chat with me, but who am I, right? So I'm Candace Huntley. I am the founding partner of SongBird Marketing Communications, and I work with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, startups, individual experts. I really help them to get their message out there. Our company itself works on everything from strategy and the foundational side of things all the way to the creative implementation. And really, in reality, it always comes down to your brand, whether it's your business brand or your personal brand, and the message that you're using to connect with people, as well as the channels that you utilize to connect talking about those messages. And so I run multiple successful strategies for people, both locally and internationally. There's a list of things that I've done there. We're not going to dwell on that because who wants to talk about social media instead of talking about me? Everybody. Yeah, definitely. Social media helping with lead generation. We'll talk about that a little bit. A lot of times the way that you're connecting with candidates and you're attracting candidates, all of these tips can be transferred over into running a business. There are different tips and tricks and little nitty-gritty details that you can look at when you're looking at, using social media as a recruiter. But in essence, social media is meant to be a social platform to really connect in really meaningful ways with people and businesses. And it's a really fun time if you utilize all the things that you have available to you. Oh, Mark popped in there. Yeah, I already mentioned that, Mark, absolutely. But if you are having trouble reading the slides, feel free to double click on them if they're too small, or you can just watch my face the whole time. I'm very expressive. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it. Why social media? We talk a little bit about how it's a mandate now. It's kind of a must because we're all stuck in this digital world where, we kind of want face-to-face interaction, but you can't have face-to-face interaction because you want to be safe. And so social media is one of those ways that you can actually bridge that gap a little bit. It's digital, and yes, you get a little bit of screen fatigue, but it's a really great way for you to still stay connected and still be human from person to person and really build those relationships. And the reality is over 90% of recruiters already use social media to connect with candidates. The question that you should be asking is, are you doing it effectively, or are you kind of just spinning your wheels and just kind of doing the bare minimum without even knowing it? Because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So You want to use social media to really establish trust, you're establishing credibility, and you're connecting with, different people and the right people and candidates and industry leaders. So social media, it's a must, whether it's a mandate or not. It's something that you really want to definitely explore and get into in a little more deeper level. So what platform should you be on? Who's familiar with all of these platforms? Drop it in there. These are kind of the main platforms that you'll see, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Those are the ones that kind of, when you hear social media, you think, okay, yeah, you're probably going to be on at least one of those platforms. Oh, you can do everything on Pinterest. It depends on who you're targeting. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about Pinterest in a second, but this is really a general discussion of your platforms, and I really want to show you that there is a big world beyond LinkedIn. And LinkedIn absolutely is, I would say, probably the primary way that recruiters use social media to attract candidates. But you have all of these other social media platforms and all of these different ways that you can really look to attract people, because when you think about it, in general, it is all about content and it's all about dialogue. And so you want to really look at what makes your audience tick. Where do they hang out? So if you have a bunch of candidates that are executives, no, they're probably not going to be best to reach on Pinterest. But you really definitely want to look at LinkedIn. You'll probably want to look at Twitter. You want to, you want to actually look at the different ways that you can connect with people. We have a question about DeviantArt. It's been a long time since they used it. Well, not all of these things are as popular, but you really want to look at things like, well, if I'm looking to attract a more creative group of people, maybe I could look at Instagram. If I'm looking at, different educational, or if you're looking at, specific industries, Pinterest might be a really great place to look, simply just for recruiting purposes. And if you're doing research about a candidate and you're looking at different things that they have to offer, because in reality, businesses, employers, they're going to look at social media. And so if someone has something untoward on their social media, you want to make sure that you know about it as well. So while you might not necessarily be doing specific targeted outreach and communication on specific platforms, you can still look at it to get a really big picture about what that candidate is. I was looking at the poll that was out earlier, one of the bigger challenges that recruiters have. And I know last time I looked, it was 70% recruiters. The biggest challenge was the fact that you're looking for qualified and great candidates. And so this is one way that you can really get a good idea of the bigger picture of a candidate. Yeah, Trevor's talking about having a situation like that once. I did. We were hoping to hire somebody, and she seemed great, and she was very proactive at meeting with us and things like that. She was really conversational in person, and when we had to look at her social media accounts, it turns out she didn't like children, and she very much hated children, which was a problem for us considering how we were having a baby, and we also work with a lot of clients in that industry as well. So you really need to look at who you're working with, and sometimes just using a social media platform as a research tool can be absolutely invaluable to you as a recruiter to get a really good idea of the bigger picture of who this person is that you're bringing onto your roster. So one of the big things for recruiters as well is, where is that divide between personal and professional brand? Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not on your personal, social media profiles. If they're public, you're not out there partying every weekend, and someone might look and say, they spend a lot of time going for drinks, do they actually work? So there are those kinds of things that you really want to make sure that you balance out for yourself. So it's that type of thing where you want to look at that messaging, that consistency. If you have a platform strategy where you are using specific platforms only for recruiting, and then you're using other platforms for your personal social media and connecting with friends and family, it's really good to kind of have a peek at that strategy that you're creating and making sure you keep it separate. You know, I don't know if people are going to get offended, but separation of church and state is that type of thing. You can really just keep it looking like that, where you're looking at two separate strategies, where you have your professional strategy and you have your personal enjoyment. And sometimes you also have to look at your candidates with a grain of salt as well, unless they're saying things that are absolutely horrendous that you know are going to blow back negatively on you. Sometimes you really have to look at the fact that they're saying, well, maybe their Facebook profile is really not meant for professional purposes, but it could be a case of, if you connect with them, then it might be something that you want to say, hey, maybe you should make that private. You know, it's one of those types of things. But in terms of your messaging, you want to make sure that, you know, that you're staying on brand for yourself, which means that you have to create your own personal brand. And it's not saying that you have to look at yourself as a business, but everybody has a personality and everybody has a way of talking. For myself, I'm a little crazy. I'm a little creative. I'm kind of the unicorns and rainbows side of the business, and I come from an entertainment background. And those are all of the things that I have accepted about myself. I use my hands a lot when I talk. I have actually had people, especially more so now doing video meetings and stuff like that, say, wow, you know, it doesn't surprise me you have an entertainment background, because you have an emotive face. And I do. And I'm melodramatic, and that's just a little bit of me. When you work with me, that's kind of what you get. You know, everything that I put out there, that's kind of what you get. And so you have to figure out exactly who you are, and make sure you don't try to put yourself into a box that you don't fit into. And, you know, when we talk about consistency, we're looking at cross-platform as well. So it could be, you know, things like, does your LinkedIn picture match your Twitter picture, match your Facebook picture, whatever you want to look at, whatever platforms they are. And one of those things as well is, if you are not a super corporate person and you like to have a good time, you know, you don't have to have that hands crossed over the chest, you know, profile picture where you're sitting in that box. You can be a little crazy. I mean, if you look at my profile picture for Hopin, that kind of is me in a nutshell. I'm always laughing. I'm a little bit loud. And that's the personal brand that I have, that I put out there. My hair is not as big as it normally is, but, you know, it's always just a little bit of craziness. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure that you create that messaging for yourself, and you create that personal brand, and you're consistent, so that if a candidate finds you, they know what they're going to get with you, because you're consistently putting out the same types of communications and the same tone of communications, and you're using the same types of words, and you're not trying to change to be something for somebody for a different conversation. And so that's kind of what you want to make sure that you're doing. Now, in terms of your content, you want to make sure that you're putting out a really good mix of content, even if it's for your own personal channels. I know tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about kind of running a staffing business, a recruiting business, but you know, even for your own personal channels, look at the different types of content that you can do. Can you write a blog that you have long form content to pull from? You should be doing video. Absolutely should be doing video. Get comfortable with it. I know this afternoon you're going to be talking a little bit more about video interviews. So, you know, that's just the way of the world right now. You kind of have to force yourself a little bit to get comfortable with it. I did an Instagram video, an IGTV, a couple weeks ago about getting comfortable being on camera. Some tips and tricks and things like that you can do to make yourself comfortable. One of the biggest things is, it doesn't have to be perfect. I said it. No one needs to be perfect on social media. You just have to be, you have to be courteous, and you have to be kind. And maybe a little funny if you're funny. You can be funny too. You know, you want to share videos, you want to share images. Think about, you know, infographics and different ways that you can provide value for people. That's really the biggest thing that you're doing. Because even though you're looking to connect with people, you still need that initial thing that's going to draw people in. And your content and how you use your content is the way you're going to do that. Sometimes it's even hashtags. Who's comfortable with hashtags? Who's not? Actually, let's say this. Who's not comfortable with hashtags? Don't be shy. Hashtags. No. Oh, I asked about hashtags and somebody left the session. Okay. You know what? Hashtags are a great way for you to join in on conversations. It's a great way for you to have people find you because they're searchable. Yeah, not sure what hashtags to use. You can use both hashtags and location tags. You know, if you're looking for a specific geographic region to actually connect with people, obviously location tags are huge. But in terms of the hashtags to use, that's going to be able to help you look at things like, yeah, location tags exist. I know it's fancy. You know, hashtags are going to help you join in on conversations that are industry related, that are trend related. So you'll be able to kind of join in on things that are already happening in the industry. So hashtags used in the right way, coupled with your location tags, will actually help you to search for and be sought out by candidates that are both in your area and in the industries that you're interested in placing. So yeah, Celso was talking about you used to be a photographer. Yeah, hashtags for photography, absolutely. You would absolutely understand that. Don't use them when I share personal life moments. You know what? That's absolutely up to you to do as well. Not everybody likes using hashtags for personal, but when you want to attract somebody and you're putting content out there to attract a candidate, you want to make sure that you're using hashtags in a way that makes sense, because that is part of the way that they'll find you. Hashtags will mean that you'll be suggested in content, you know, when they're searching in content searches, so on specific platforms. That's how the algorithms will say, you know, here's content that you like, or suggested content, or things like that. And so you want to make sure that you're using hashtags in a meaningful way. So for example, if you're on LinkedIn, don't use 20, 30 hashtags. It's really inappropriate to do that. But using 2 or 3 hashtags, absolutely 3 max on LinkedIn, is a really great way for people to find you and for LinkedIn to say, hey, you know, Wasim posts stuff about this industry. I'm going to suggest content that uses these hashtags to him, but I'm also going to suggest his content to other people that are posting similar things. And so it's a really great way for you to really get involved with the algorithms. So a big question is, when will you post and how often? This is the great debate, almost as important as whether you put the toilet paper over the outside or underneath. I will always fight to the end that the toilet paper should go above. If you disagree with me, we can fight afterwards. But when it comes to social media, if you ask 10 different people how often you should post and when you should post, you're going to get 10 different answers. That's the reality of it. There are certain rules of thumb that you can kind of look at and gauge, but in reality, this is kind of what you should be aiming for. If you're going to be on Facebook, 3 times per week is okay to aim for. Instagram, 3 times per week. Twitter is one that you need to be really active on. It's 2 to 5 times per day to really make it work. The lifespan of a tweet is something like 18 minutes. It's very short. And so if you're only posting once a day or once every other day, people are not really going to hear from you a lot. LinkedIn, 3 to 5 times per week is kind of the minimum that you should be doing, especially if it's your main social media platform that you're using to connect. The reality is you want to make sure you're looking at consistency over quantity. In this case, it's super important. You're looking to connect with people. It's not a hard sell. You really just want to make sure that you're putting out quality content, and doing that at a lower quantity is going to be better for you than trying to pump out tons and tons and tons and tons of content, and where people are like, well, I don't really care anymore. So you really want to think about your content, and this is a good way for you to kind of aim for that. Try to create content for each platform, because certain platforms will use content differently. The length is going to be different. They use hashtags differently. For example, Instagram, you can use more hashtags than you would on Twitter. Twitter, you'll want to use 2 to 3 hashtags, the same as LinkedIn. Facebook is another beast. I wouldn't suggest Facebook as your main point of contact to reach out to candidates. But if you are using LinkedIn, which most of you probably are, you'll want to make sure that you're using all of the aspects of the platform. So for example, utilize LinkedIn Pulse to try to, showcase your expertise. It's putting out longer form content. LinkedIn loves it when you're putting out content that gets people to stay within the platform. So that's a really good way for you to showcase your credibility. Who has used InMail to connect with candidates on LinkedIn? Anybody? Me? Yeah, I have. Good. Many times. Excellent. Yeah. So there have been studies done, and it's no surprise, but let's say studies done, 16% lower response rate if you reach out on Saturdays. So, I mean, you might think, oh, well, if someone's searching for a job, they're looking 7 days a week, and maybe they might, but you also want to make sure that you're putting your own efforts in at the best times for you. So with Wasim, you find that the best time is the weekend, which is interesting because the studies that have been done, and multiple studies have shown that Saturdays are really not as effective. Whereas if you're reaching out during the week, mid-morning, that's kind of the time when people are getting things done. They're doing their social media, especially if they're looking for a job. And then they're kind of off doing other things throughout the day. Most responses come in during Monday. Absolutely, so you want to make sure that you're looking at, and this is the next kind of point to look at, is you need to figure out what exactly works for you. And so this is why I say 10 different people will give you 10 different answers, because it matters how your audience responds to you. And so it is a little bit of trial and error, but you can kind of use these as a little bit of a rule of thumb to really kind of create your strategy in terms of reaching out to people. Talked about providing value. These are kind of the 3 things that candidates will want from you. Obviously, they'll want to hear about job postings. That's a big one. But you don't want to only put out job postings on your social media platforms. They want to learn something new. So do you bring something new to the table? Is there an expert that you spoke to, or you learned something new, or you wrote a blog post? Those are the things that you really want to look at. And then they also want to hear about new trends and innovation in the industry that they're in. So if you can provide value so that, for example, hearing about new trends and innovation, someone can walk into an interview and they can, have this knowledge that they've gotten from you, and you're proving to be valuable to them. You're proving to be an ally, a good relationship, someone that they're going to want to come back to. And so that's the idea, is that you want to make sure that you're providing tons and tons of value for potential candidates. One way that you can do this very easily is you can actually create a lead magnet. And so you can create a lead magnet is simply something that you're putting out there, that it really allows you to collect emails, names, whatever you're looking to collect in terms of that information. And so you're creating this lead magnet put out there in exchange for someone giving you their email and their contact information, their name. So for example, as a recruiter, you could do a guide to negotiating your best salary, or a guide to nailing your next interview. It could be as simple as, a guide to the best questions to ask about, about compensation and benefits. Those are the different types of things that you can create. Do it very easy, focus on keeping it simple. It doesn't have to be more than even 1 or 2 pages. It doesn't have to be fancy, but if you throw together a PDF and you're using, you can collect emails very simply even through something like MailChimp, where you can create a landing page that allows you to send out content that's gated content, that gives you the opportunity to collect a lot of names and have people come to you that you could then have these conversations with. And so it's that value. Always think about value in everything you do. Melissa, you're saying that you often get responses on weekends, which again, if that's working for you, then absolutely you can do that. Obviously, studies only show a certain groups of people, and so you have to figure out what works best for you. Absolutely. So the most important thing to focus on social media is to be social. There's the word social in there for a reason. You want to make sure you're encouraging dialogue. You don't want to ignore comments. Stay away from constant job postings like we talked about, because that's akin to that sell, where someone is constantly using capital letters on Twitter. Ha, Canadians are different. This was a Canadian study, actually. So, but like I said, it just depends on the people that were asked the questions, right? So you want to look at engaging daily. How many people are on social media every day, engaging actively daily? Thinking long term. We talked about showing some personality. We have almost daily, LinkedIn daily, great. One thing that I find that a lot of people get a little bit overwhelmed with is they think, well, social media daily, that's a lot. How much time do I have to spend on there? Well, you know what? Even as simple 15 minutes a day will allow you to go in there, respond to comments, share some things that you find interesting. So that way that if you're batch creating content ahead of time, so for example, if you wanted to do a video series to provide value, you can schedule those ahead of time and really just focus on your daily engagement so that you're having those conversations. And so, schedule that time for yourself every single day. And whatever you get done during that time that you're scheduled, do that and then move on. Don't get hung up on things and spend hours and hours on social media, where if you have time, that's great, and you can learn a lot and connect with a lot of people, but sometimes you have to wear a lot of different hats during the day, so you have to be realistic with what you're doing. But always engage daily and really look to create those meaningful long-term connections with people. And if you're aiming for that and you're always aiming to provide value, then you're definitely in the right place for your social media. Absolutely. So those are kind of the main things that I wanted to talk about.